Maelstrom, Harry inflamed the emotions by repeatedly telling his wife how closely she resembled Diana. Stop flapping your tongue, Harry. Can't you talk about anything else? Australia's huge welcome to them was comparable to Diana's tour of Australia with Charles and baby William in 1983. Tens of thousands had flocked every day to glimpse at the princess, and many could see that there was some parallel into this tour for Meghan because she was getting a lot of positive attention as well. But what's interesting about that tour with Charles and Diana is that while the millions took note of Diana, that was also the tour where the media concealed the evidence that the short marriage was already troubled. And on that tour, they were having terrible troubles behind the scenes, Charles and Diana were. And yet everybody thought everything was just divine with Diana. So while Harry wants everybody to notice, oh, look how Australia loves Meghan just like they loved my mom, the other similarity that we could draw here is, yeah, look at the trouble of the marriage behind the scenes. His parents' relationship had irrevocably broken down after Harry's birth the following year, following this tour. But Harry never really thought about that part. The more Harry drew parallels with his mother, the more Meghan became convinced of her importance to the monarchy. So he's just continually pouring into her what she already believes. I can do whatever I want because they can't get rid of me. If they get rid of me, they're going to have a mess on their hands. I'll be the second Diana, and we can all see what a trial the monarchy had after Diana died and how everybody turned on the monarchy and said, why were you so cold to Diana? So they can't mistreat me because they don't want to have to hear about it again. I'm safe. If I always compare myself to Diana, they can never attack me because then they'll have to relive their worst nightmare. The only clue to their preoccupation was Meghan's comment about a pair of jewel-crusted earrings that she was wearing from Diana's collection. She said to the media, "It's so important to me to know that she's a part of this with us." Okay. Harry, who was merely 12 years old at the time of Diana's death, could not fully understand his mother. We've talked about this many times, and Bauer's making the same point that I have, in that he has such a limited understanding of who she was. He doesn't understand the nuance of her personality because, while she was a traditionalist and an iconoclast, a mischievous revolutionary and a selfless loyalist, he didn't appreciate the fact that she was many times both in the same. He did not appreciate that his mother did not collect a court of followers. She compartmentalized her friends from the courtiers. Sycophants and celebrities were summoned only if they served her purpose. Among those chosen were journalists Andrew Morton and the BBC's Martin Bashir. Her interviews with both, she knew, were dynamite. But they were directed at Charles and Camilla. They were never directed at the Queen, and she knew the difference. Individual royals, Diana knew, must conform or the institution would lose its legitimacy. Diana's strength was the public's recognition of her vulnerability. As eyewitnesses to tragedy, both in her life and death, the public equated their own weaknesses to her experiences of betrayal, fear, and grief, and even to their personal sufferings after the death. So, Harry and Meghan want to use the magic of Diana, but they don't really even understand who she was as a person and how she walked that tightrope so well. One of the things is that she came from a completely different generation of people who did have some respect for the concept of hierarchy and had a degree of respect for people who are in positions of natural authority, like parents and grandparents. But Harry and Meghan don't have any appreciation, not just for a created institution, but for the natural institution of parental authority. Meghan's, the way she treated her father is such a revelation to her heart. And so the Queen could never have expected that she would honor a created institution, a man-made created institution, when she can't even respect a God-created institution, like the one of parent and child. The Sussexes had convinced themselves that their Australian success blessed them with Diana's magic. Never having studied British history, politics, or shown interest in biographies, Meghan could not understand that Diana had won the public's affection after years of work. Neither she nor Harry could grasp that emulating Diana required time to weave a narrative and create a brand from which influence would flow. Unlike Meghan, Diana had never needed to seek fame or money because both had come naturally. So Meghan felt like all she had to do was come out and act like a victim, and then she would be Diana. That's how uncluttered her vision of becoming Diana was. Oh, just say you're a victim, and then you're Diana. And that is that is the workings of a simplistic mind. In her understanding, and encouraged by Harry, Meghan conjured a fantasy that she would provide the leadership the monarchy required. The monarchy doesn't need leadership, they had the Queen. But Meghan thinks, let's propel it into a new version of feminism. Her activism would enhance the brand. To her staff, she gave the impression that she believed she personified the monarchy's importance. Meghan's activism could partly be justified by Charles' example. Now, Meghan might be forgiven by thinking that activism was potentially part of the new monarchy, because Charles had taken up a lot of causes in his time before becoming the king that some would say showed that he meddled in causes outside of the realm of his authority. So over the previous 40 years, he had controversially sought to influence key decisions in Britain in architecture, medicine, the environment, GM crops, the army, fox hunting, and much more. British culture and history had been altered by his intervention. He had also created a series of charities, notably the Prince's Trust, benefiting thousands of young people's lives. Charles' impact was visible. Meghan wanted to do the same, but just by addressing audiences in front of cameras about her causes. So she still wants it to be about her. And of course, Charles can be forgiven for his activism because it were causes that his heart really believed in. It wasn't like he was trying to garner a lot of attention for himself. It was, how can I make the world a better place with my privilege and with my position? And that's where he and Meghan aren't anything alike. Regardless of what you may think about Charles's causes, he took those things up because he believed with all his heart they would make Britain a better place. It was never so he could make much of himself. He didn't have to make much of himself. He was the prince and the heir to the throne. But Meghan can't, even if she later wanted to say, yeah, but Charles has always cared about activism. Yeah, quietly behind the scenes he's done things. It was never him splashing his face all over everything and trying to make it about him and coming out with all of his outfits and never actually doing any work. Charles is a workaholic. I mean, he can't stop working. And Meghan, to use Charles as any comparison, I think is super unfair. I also don't even think that Tom Bauer was completely honest by even comparing the two. I think he is attempting to be by saying, well, Meghan wants to be an activist and Charles isn't an activist. And he is the one who said, but Meghan wants to be in front of the cameras and Charles isn't. So I'm not saying he's completely dishonest about it, but I don't even think we can compare those two things on any level. They're not the same thing. It's activism with completely different definitions. So it's just Meghan usurping a word for her own intentions, which is so typical. Naturally, her American agents and lawyers were encouraging her. For years, they had struggled to land parts for her, and now they believe she could earn millions from her activism. Even that phrase alone, you could earn millions from your activism, shows what a broken vision Hollywood has of the role as activist. It's not so you can make millions. I mean, that is, again, what they would hope could happen from it, because they have divorced the word activist from its true intentions, and they've given it they've given making yourself rich a pretty name. So they all think, hey, you know what? You could make millions doing this whole activism gig, and look, now that you're a duchess, it's going to be super easy for you to just make money hand over fist. Of course, she would need an American base and a foundation to deposit the proceeds. There was even, she was told, an American billionairess who might provide the startup sponsorship. Her advisors neither understood that their strategy was incompatible with the monarchy, nor did they care. In their uncluttered scenario, Meghan would earn millions, and they would reap commission. What childish scheming! To completely ignore the facts of life so you can keep believing that millions are, right around the corner. I mean, I guess to some degree their scheming paid off because Harry and Meghan have made millions, but not in any legitimate, respectable way. Making millions is always on the table if you don't care about how you do it. On 23rd October, 1 week into the tour, the die was cast. Harry and Meghan had convinced themselves that William was jealous of their success in Australia. The time was right for change. They needed to break out of Kensington Palace's claustrophobic fishbowl. Harry proposed that the palace should rewrite the rule book. Rather than Meghan being a dutiful member of the supporting cast, she should star as a campaigner, independent of the Cambridges and even of the Queen. When I tell you that this poor boy has detached himself completely from any reality he grew up in, how quickly he has been brought into this fantasy land with her. Do you know what I mean? It's like, how long has he known her and forgotten everything he ever knew? I have never seen anybody so duped. How do you think that you can bring in your wife from Nowheresville, bring her into the fold, you who with your diminishing star as more and more children are born to William and Kate, you think that your wife, as you are being lowered farther down, is going to somehow rise above her station, come rip-roaring into the scene, kick the Queen out of the throne, and sit there and reign and rule with all of her woke activism? What world are you living in where this scenario is plausible or possible or even kind of something that could happen? You all work for the Queen. You don't get to come and be like, move over, old lady. It's my turn now. Meghan watched Harry seek to finalize their agreement with London to create a separate court and administration. In that fundamental change, Harry and Meghan would no longer work with the Royal Foundation but operate a separate charity, which they would call Sussex Royal. Both were pledging to promote social well-being to make the world a better place. They also agreed that before the birth of their child, Jason Knopf needed to be replaced. It is so wild that their big thing is they want to make the world a better place, but they can't even make their office a better place. Jessica Mulrooney was an eyewitness as Meghan balanced the stress of the tour, the news from London about the staff complaints, and the discussions with her business advisor, Andrew Mayer, about reestablishing her presence in Los Angeles. Y'all, these conversations are all being had at the same time. If we want to pretend for even a second, like, out of the desperation of her heart after realizing that the royal family just completely hated her, she stumbled back home looking for a shoulder to cry on. And then lo and behold, the world was filled with opportunities in which she could exercise her voice. For once, the voice that she had as a woman. No, she's been planning this. She's been plotting this in depth since the minute she entered London. She hasn't ever had any intentions of staying. We talked about that during the wedding, but I think that, well, I knew that she had been planning to leave at some point before they actually did leave. I had no idea how early on she was planning this strategic exit and how much she'd already set up back home to cushion her when she fell. When she fell, this is the most orchestrated fall you've ever seen. Now, that day, Mayer registered two foundations, the ArchieFoundation.com and ArchieFoundation.org. 5 days later, he registered at Archie Foundation on Instagram. Archie is an ancient Greek term meaning beginning or origin. Her Los Angeles advisors, misunderstanding that as Harry's wife, Meghan was not seeking approval on a stage but seeking respect, encouraged her to behave like a celebrity actress rather than a royal. And Meghan, though she was aware of the protocol that surrounded her behavior, whether they knew or not, she knew how she was supposed to behave. But she chose to listen to them rather than to listen to the advisors she had. And then she could come out crying like, I had no idea what I was doing was wrong. But you did know, because there were people telling you, you can't behave like this. You just decided to choose who you wanted to listen to.